15 months, I'm Bruce. 15 months ago, Lynette, my wife, and I flew down to Sydney to visit Russ and Jill. We live in Brisbane. They are in Sydney. While we were down there, we decided to go for a coffee, catch a movie, late afternoon. From Russ and Jill's unit, it was probably a 30-minute stroll to the shopping centre. So Russ and I decided to walk, and Jill and Lynette decided to take push bikes. Having a slightly competitive nature, Russ and I were walking. I slowly started to increase the pace, faster and faster. But he knew what I was doing, and he immediately commented, "What's the rush? We'll get there soon enough." He knew exactly what I was up to. I noticed, though, while we were walking, he was limping slightly, and he told me he'd had a groin injury, and it had been sore for a little while, and he was going back to Auckland for his 51st birthday, and he was going to get checked out there. It didn't seem to hinder him too much, and the following day we played probably a dozen games of table tennis. I won every one of them. Okay, I won none. And he went home, and then I got a phone call from Kev. It was awesome. I stand before you today to celebrate the life of Russ. I'm also fixing a mistake I made 26 years ago when Russ and Jill married. So thanks, Russ, you've got me. I'm sorry, but that's just for me. Jill knows too. On behalf of my wife, Lynette, and my children, Michelle, Matt, Sam, my deepest sympathies to you, Jill, a wonderful wife and mother, Dave and Laura, Ra, Ron and Shirley, Kev and Irel, Murray and Ian, Robbie, and all other family members. Russ, to many of you, was more than family. He was an employer, a counsellor, friend, mentor, amongst others, but to me, Russ was my best mate. We first met, and Richard's touched on it, at Melville Intermediate 40 years ago, and formed a relationship and a friendship that has endured. We schooled together, flattered together, both in New Zealand and later Australia. We played rugby together, we travelled together, but especially watched each other's lives and relationships blossom and grow. We were never more than a phone call away, particularly when I was living in Australia. And if you know Russ, you'll know about rugby. If there was a test match on, neither of us would answer the phone, because if it was a late night here or a late night there and he didn't tape it and I didn't tape it, you just wouldn't answer the phone because you'd hear ring, ring, you'd pick up 27-9. Oh, thanks very much, Russ. It was just so typical of him, but I have to admit I probably got him a heap more times than he ever got me. There wasn't many times, though, that we didn't talk or meet. There was more than a few months apart. That was our friendship. In early teens, Russ, Richard, Steve and I formed a bond. We did most things together as we were young adults growing up. We shared a house in Lake Road, Frankton, before moving to a flat in Paddington, Sydney. And to say we didn't live in the proverbial fast lane was an understatement. Our early teens and adulthood was a cocktail of non-alcoholic drinks, cigarettes, and blue glass music. I don't know. It sounds familiar to some of you. Interfaced with trips to Great Barrier on motorbikes, our combi van escapades around the North Island, late night rides through Hamilton City, sailing on the Hamilton Lake, touch come tackle, down on the common, recording records onto the reel-to-reel under Ron and Shirley's house while playing pool. We basically did it all. Russ's favourite catch cry, and Richard's already mentioned it, if someone wasn't interested or faltering over a trip or an activity, was you may as well. You may as well. And it seemed to be enough to sway the vote in his favour. He just had that ability. Russ influenced my taste in music. He taught me to ride a Vespa, to drive my first car, and I have to thank Ma and Pa, and sorry about the gearbox. That there was a back entrance. If you mounted a footpath for 50 metres, you could get a car through onto the boys' high playing fields. Sorry, Robbie. That acid worked faster if you stuck it behind your eyeball. Tough luck about the blue dye, though. That gin was better drunk straight. Sorry, Kev, about the school classroom. To travel, and it was cool to have a poofter dog and to go for it. Being a little bit conservative as I am, that didn't quite fit the go for it. But with Russ, we're never left wondering. The amount of times he's been up and down just shows his passion to succeed. If we're in a shopping centre, Russ would be found, and most of you probably know that have been around with him, in a record bar or the business aisle of a bookshop. His passion to learn never faltered. There were times when Russ and Jill would arrive at our home in Brisbane to recharge the batteries and for us to work out new strategies. He was truly an entrepreneur. About a week and a half ago, Lynette and I came to see Russ and Jill, because he's a mate. And while Lynn and Jill went out, Russ and I had a chance to chat just ourselves. We talked about how his funeral would go, how many people he thought would attend. He asked me to count. How big was the church going to be? Big enough? It is, Russ. And that Richard and I will be pallbearers. You know, we're sitting here, and I just said, man, this is bizarre, Russ. We're talking about it. You're still here, and it's just totally blowing me away. I think he thought, well, I'll get Bruce through this, and he looked over, and when he was late in his life, his eyes would get really heavy. He couldn't open it. To open his eyelids was a struggle. To talk was a struggle, but he could hear everything that was going on around him, and he loved people being around him. And he looked over. There was a big clock on the wall, and he looked over at the clock, and he said, "How long do you think Lynette and Jill will be?" Because Lynette and Jill would be. They'd just gone out, and I thought, well, okay, they left around 10:30. Jill said they'd be an hour, so probably 1 o'clock. Russ said immediately 12:30, and then he said the stakes. He said, the stakes will be you have to have for lunch what I'm having for lunch. He hadn't eaten for 3 weeks. What show did I have? I immediately revised my time to 12:25. At 12:15, I started to worry. At 12:23, Russ opened his eyes, looked over at the clock, and asked how hungry I was. At 12:24, the girls walked in. Man, I was stoked. Russ, it was never in doubt. Even near the end, you just could not suppress his humour. It's just, hey, that's what mates are about. I wish I could share so many great times I've had with Russ and friends and families, and there are many. But my memories as such will remain mine, just that you that have shared in Russ's lives will have your own memories. I'm lucky enough to have met Russ and known Russ and Jill and becoming, before a Christian and after a Christian, to see the birth of Dave and Laura and now his passing. Friends such as Russ are rare, and the memories that I carry will be forever. I miss you already, mate.